Welcome back to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. I'm going to share another game of Bobby Fischer, who in this game is playing the black pieces, against Sammy Reshevsky, who's playing the white pieces. And if I understand my story right, and those of you who know history of chess better than I do, which is the vast majority of you, it is because of Sammy Reshevsky's Judaism and his religion, and so he wouldn't play chess on Saturdays, that Bobby Fischer joined a religion so that he could antagonize Reshevsky. Something along that line. Anyway, these two were not best of friends. They did, of course, and nobody was best friends with Bobby Fischer, really. He was hard to get along with. But this particular game is just really, it's like 60 moves, and I tried to record it all on one side of my paper, so forgive me if I fumble around a little bit, but this is the semi-Tarish defense. Now, this was a match that they were playing, and this is their 5th game, and again, it's in the Bobby Fischer My 60 Memorable Games. This was the most exciting game of the match, and it really is a pop dilly illy, I'm telling you. Knight f6, let's see if I do this right. It's the semi-Tarish defense. They played it in 1961. And we are going to get rocking and rolling here pretty quick. Knight c3 and d5, directly confronting the center, an exchange. And now here, I mean, one possibility is to exchange with the pawn. Fischer said, you know, I don't like doing that kind of wood pushing to exchange with the pawn and then try to figure that from there. He said, I like to make it much more exciting, so I always take it with the knight. Or at least he did in this game, I should say. So I shouldn't say always. I'm putting words in his mouth. And that's a no-no, especially when it's Bobby Fischer. And now c5. Again, a direct confrontation. He's not being timid. This will open lines, which is the whole idea with Fischer's style of play. And now Reshevsky is going to give the central pawn some support, truly. Speedy development, central control. Speedy development, central control. Speedy development, central control. Speedy development, central control. It's what we see time and again. Speedy development, castling, central control. Castling. Neither one of them are playing goof around chess. This is a really important match. Sammy Reshevsky was the child prodigy like Bobby Fischer. This is seriously powerful opponents playing each other. And they don't monkey around at all. C takes d4, and E will take d4 here, and now there is here, Fischer says that white and his setup has a freer game, meaning probably that at this point in his position he can, well, he's got more space. However, what is giving white more space, which is a bonus in one of the Silman imbalances, and in which Alekhine took advantage of a lot, as did Capablanca a lot, he does have the isolated pawn. And so, will this prove to be a weakness or a strength? Depends on how you play it. With an isolini, this is the square Fischer wants to block. Ideally with a knight, if possible. the square right in front of the isolated pawn, and then you attack the pawn. Now that's not the hard and fast rule set in concrete. That's the hard and fast rule set in concrete. And if you seek to do it, that's how you can do it, but there are other ways, but that's the best way. And all rules are made to be broken. Again, flexibility with an understanding of the laws of chess as the game evolves and changes is far more important than being a fundamentalist. I have to blockade that square no matter what, and I cannot let that pawn move or I lose the game type attitude, right? So, as a rule, that might be the square we're looking at. Right now, things are fairly even though White's position is more free, and it is this pawn, Fischer says, it is this pawn that causes that to be so. Bishop b2, b6. Interestingly, and now it was here too, if I remember correctly, in the notes, rather than moving the bishop back, Fischer suggested the rook here, the queen here, no, the queen here, the bishop here, and the rook here, for a stronger setup, more firm center, and all that, but Reshevsky chose not to do that. Fischer will fianchetto his bishop here. Reshevsky still has his two bishops down a powerful, pointing toward the king side at least. So, I mean, it's not like he's in trouble, but Reshevsky bumps his queen to here instead, and Fischer will fianchetto, taking the long diagonal toward the castled king, and then bishop g5. Technically not a pin on the knight. It is a developing move. The bishop eliminates the pin. Of course, Fischer does not bother chasing away the bishop, even though his bump weakens the h6 and f6 squares. It's very interesting. He's got a battery here with the queen and the bishop. So there's your checkmate right now from Reshevsky if Fischer doesn't pay attention. That is simply a waste of time because the queen comes, well, the queen doesn't come here because of this, but he's going to take the knight and then the queen's in. So Fischer prevents the battery by bumping the g-pawn. So Reshevsky's already throwing tricks at Fischer instantly in the game, and Fischer has to be on his toes. Yes? So now that Fischer has eliminated a quick checkmate threat from Reshevsky, Reshevsky goes rook f to e with a partial file. Fischer will answer him, putting his rook on the e also, directly opposite. And then Reshevsky goes h4, and now this was criticized by one or two grandmasters, then a couple others said, yeah, that's a good move. Fischer himself felt he had to get something going on the king side, and so that was the best way, because what Fischer wants to do is begin, and he does somewhat, he needs to, the proper way, of course, to refute an attack on the wing is to counterattack in the center, and this isolated pawn is begging, that's the target, so that is what Fischer says he will pile on, the pressure. In other words, he's going to take several pieces and begin to hit that pawn because it is isolated. And then Reshevsky matches Fischer, rook a to c1, and now the knight comes to d5, and he is blockading the isolated pawn. That's the theory, that's the idea, that's probably the best way to do it. Ideally with the knight, Fischer does put the knight there. Is that permanent? No, not necessarily. However, that is a very good move. Reshevsky responds by putting the knight to e4. So we have a, remember, they're playing more, rather than a material exchange, pawn for pawn, bishop for knight, queen for queen, rook for bishop, bishop for whatever. They're playing more of a positional game. And position is important, realizing Reshevsky has the freer game, which roughly translated would mean he can coordinate his pieces better for an attack. Look, all of his pieces are aiming. One of them is here already. All of his pieces are aiming at the king side, more or less. The knights can jump into this pretty easy. They're right here. Along with the long-range pieces, you have this battery with the queen and the bishop. So Reshevsky's more or less announcing he would like to do a king side. So Fischer, in order to refute that, has to counteract in the center. So this is a positional game, and here's why this next comment is really interesting. He pushes the f-pawn, and then he says, yeah, I know. It's an ugly positional blunder. That is Fischer's comment on his own move. So let's see what happens here. Reshevsky's knight will come back to c3, and now, because of this particular way that he's done his positional blunder, Fischer is going to try to whittle out, thin out, as it were, and he doesn't know if he's successful or not yet, and he said, yeah, that's smacking me, all right. I deserved that one too. That's a fantastic move. Fischer is relegated to going to knight 4, and now queen e3. And now Fischer pulls the trigger already on the isolated pawn. Rather than just blockade it, Fischer simply takes it. Now, here is where Reshevsky does a very good heads-up play. And Fischer comments, he says, exquisitely alert, very alert, spectacular. That's excellent. That is an excellent move on Reshevsky's part. And it's virtually forcing Fischer to exchange queens now. If he was just trying to apply pressure to build up, he can't now, and here's why. Because the target of this knight is right there, forking eventually the two rooks, according to Fischer. So, queen takes e3. Yeah, he takes the I gotta read this real carefully because I've got my notes scattered from here to breakfast on this page. I tried to put them all, it's a long game, so I tried to put them all on the same page, and I'm really hoping I don't mess up. Now watch what Fischer does. Watch what Fischer does. Knight takes g2. Kablam! I mean kablam! And he exclamation point. Now that's something. What the heck? That is something else. Let's see. The king will take the knight, of course. Now that the ladies are off the board, and of course there's a discovered check, knight to d4, so you can't have the knight taken at this point. And then Reshevsky puts the bishop there. The tactics and the counter thrusts and thrusts are really powerful in this game. Beautiful, beautiful move. So the bishop will take e4 check again, and the knight will take e4.
No more check, cowboy.
And now the knight will take b5. So Fischer is holding his own, and now, rather than the fork on the two rooks at d6, Reshevsky's fantastic knight, dancing knight I should say, does the fork at f6. Really interesting, isn't it? I mean, Reshevsky's playing a heck of a game. King f7, and then of course the knight will take the rook, truly, and then the rook will take the knight. Yes, indeed. And now Reshevsky bumps the a pawn. So we're clearly in an end game. Fischer apparently has compensation with the number of pawns, but Reshevsky has the pair of rooks. So how would you handle this? This is one of the best endgames we will see. Knight to d6. Rook comes to c7 check. And king goes to f6. The correct place. Rook e to c1. Notice he wants to dominate that file and keep it. That's very important because it gets him toward Fischer's camp. Again, the open file and the use of the file to attack. He is aware of this, so he bumps that. Rook will take the pawn. Knight will come to e4, blockading the isolated pawn, centralizing the knight in a spectacular outpost on the 5th rank, which means that knight is exquisitely placed, and it's toward the king. That's good heads-up chess, man. Centralization. Rook's going to come up here to e6. Reshevsky is going to eliminate the queenside pawns and then push his own, of course. In the meantime, Fischer is going to have to get something going on the king side, isn't he? So that's the basic announcement that they both made. Rook will come to d8. Rook will go to c2. Rook will go to d3. Rook will take b6. The pawns on the king side are eliminated. The central pawn is eliminated. And now the pawns begin their push. And the pawns begin their push. And here, Reshevsky makes an error. He brings the rook to f2. And what this enables is for Fischer to get his rook behind Reshevsky's passed pawns. And that is where, in the end game, that is where rooks belong, and Reshevsky let him do it. There was another way. He plays through several variations, but by coming over to guard the king like that, Reshevsky was certain that he was going to get one of these two pawns in. In order to do that, he whittles down a piece. He goes back on the exchange, right? So the knight will take, and then the king will take, and then the rook comes to e5. This mistake allows Fischer to properly place his rook. And that's why he said it was a very bad move on Reshevsky's part. And now he's got the b4 bump, and now the rook to e3 again. a6, and rook a3. He's behind the passed pawn. And Fischer made a big deal about that, and that is one of the elements of Silman's chess also. Well, and Yusupov talks about it too, Rooks always belong behind passed pawns in an endgame, and that's where you need to put them. And that's where Fischer got it. But it's not a done deal. Not by any chance. Rook c6. Fischer is going to bump to g5. H will take g5. H will take g5. Reshevsky brings the b5 up, protecting both the rook and the pawn. Fischer will push to g4. Notice that the rook here, and all of a sudden the pawns, almost as it were, materialize out of nowhere. That spooked Reshevsky. He realizes, oh my goodness, my rook can't get into position. The king's there, behind his passed pawns. He's got a rook on the third rank, and he can bring those pawns in against my king, and I'm still too far away. Reshevsky was sweating bullets. Now, if I've read the stories right on Reshevsky, he always had time trouble with his clock. He took too long on so many of his moves that he was constantly in time trouble, and yet he was an absolutely world-class chess player, one of the 5 strongest in the world at one point. He was a fantastic chess virtuoso, but here he could be running into trouble. Rook c8 and king f5. And then he bumps the b6, and then g3 check. Here come those Fischer pawns, and then king comes to e1 so that he doesn't keep getting checked. You don't want to move to where the king keeps getting checked. No, not at all. That would not be good. And now rook a1 check, and king e2. And g2, here comes the queen, and now rook f8 check, and king to e4. King to e4. And then rook takes f4 check. King takes, f4. And b7, and Fischer goes ahead and queens. And the crazy thing about this is, one of the chess masters, I can't remember which one now, says he did it too hasty. As it is, it ended up okay for him, but rather than push the queen in, imagine that's a pawn, the e4 was the complete win. That would have won it easily. And Fischer plays through the analysis. Instead, he hurried and went and got his queen. And then Reshevsky hurried and got his queen. So now the ladies are back onto the board, and Fischer goes king f5. Because it was check. Sorry, I forgot to say that. Now the queen to f8 check, and king to e4. And here's where I hope I've got my... Yes, I do. Now the queen comes to a8 check, and king d4. Watch how he puts his king here. This is quite interesting. Queen to d8 check, and king to c4. Queen to d3 check, and king, to d6. No, that can't be right. What? Queen to d3, king to c5. There we go. King to c5, boy. And then queen to c3. Yes, and now king to d6. He's got an island here with this pawn that he can hide behind, which is very helpful. Queen to d2, king to e5. He moves in front first. Now queen to b2. Not to worry. He goes to king f5. He keeps it at f5 because here's where white resigns. And the reason why, it's a terrific lesson on the end game with promoting pawns and having an island that your king can work around as protection, because white runs out of checks. And he says, for instance, if queen b5, then king f6, and queen b2, now you push the pawn, and he has no more checks. And that gives Fischer back the move, and he'll checkmate Reshevsky's king, right? Because he can't come down to here and go check, because the queen will take it. So he ran out of checks from here. There is no other way to check without losing. So that was quite a game. I think that was like a 57 move game against Sammy Reshevsky and Bobby Fischer. So there's your chess exercise. That was a fun game. Very interesting, fun game. In the meantime, remember, be happy, do well, have fun, work hard, don't overeat like I've been doing in the quarantine. I've gained like 297,000 pounds. I've got a lot of exercise to do this summer to get back down to 200 pounds. I'm going to try to. Wish me luck. Going to study a lot of chess while I'm riding my bicycle. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next Backyard Professor Chess videos.